So in this lesson, we're going to talk a little bit about proportional reasoning, which is very closely related to linear functions in that the proportions of a linear function stay constant the whole time. So this question is asking for every 5 students that walk into the building, 3 get a temperature check. So if 160 students came into the building this morning, how many temperature checks were performed? So the easiest way I think to set this thing up is to start off with the proportion. We get 3 out of every 5 students. So 3 are checked out of every 5 students. Now the best way to set this up now is to make it a proportion, set it to another fraction. Now the key with this is if you have the number of students checked on the top in the beginning, you have to keep that on the top on the other side too. And students are on the bottom, which means over here, students also have to be on the bottom. Wow, it appeared just like magic. Okay, so we have 160 students walking into the building. So if that's just students, that goes on the bottom. And we want to know how many were checked. So that's just going to be a variable. We'll call it x. So to solve this problem, what you want to do is cross multiply. It's the easiest way to handle this thing. So boom, boom. You get 5x equals 480. Now to solve for x, this is a simple linear equation. All you have to do is divide by 5, and then x equals 96. So 96 students were checked. Now, one thing to do here that's super important is to make sure your answer actually makes sense in context. So like you see how a little over half of the students got checked, because like half would be 2.5, so it's just a little bit more. If you take half of 160 students, you get 80, and 96, yeah, you see it's a little bit more than half. So like, yeah, this answer makes a lot of sense for what we're talking about. Now this question is another example of the same idea. We're going to talk about increases in wages and wealth from 1970 to 2020, so over the last 50 years. In 1970, the New York State minimum wage was $1.85 an hour. First off, let that sink in. That's kind of funny when you think about how much money how much that would be right now. It's not very much. The New York State minimum wage now is $11.80 an hour. Also, if you do some math on that, you'll find out it's not very much still. Now, in 1970, the wealthiest person in the world, his name was Howard Hughes, and he did a lot of films and had some aviation companies. He was worth $1.5 billion. So hypothetically, if minimum wage and the ultra wealthy, like the wealthiest person in the world, moved in proportion, then how much should the wealthiest person in the world be worth today? That wealthiest person, of course, is Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and we'll get to how much he makes in just a second. So let's look at it here. 1970. Let's start off this way. We'll do 1970 on top, and then we'll have 2020 on the bottom, just to keep things easy. So 1970, we have $1.85. And in 2020, we have $11.80. And now this is all equal to 1970, we have 1.5 billion. I'm just going to write it as 1.5 for our purposes, and we could know that it's not necessarily, commensurable units in this circumstance. But I'll just write 1.5 here, and then whatever we get in the bottom of this for this x, we'll know that that's in billions as well. Okay, so like one way to think of it is these are dollars per hour, these are just billions of dollars. And it's not a perfect system, but I don't feel like writing that many zeros, and it'll make the math unnecessarily complex. So next step, cross multiply. We're going to end up with 1.85x, that's the easy part, equals 17.7. So the last step is you just divide this by 1.85, and x. We get that Bezos should, in a perfectly proportional theoretical world where the lower classes make the same as the upper classes, Bezos should... I'm sorry, fire truck, are you done? Okay, so he should be worth... I hope you guys heard the fire truck, otherwise I just sound like an insane person, but one just went by. Should be worth $9.56 billion. Now, anybody who actually knows these numbers knows that right about now, Jeff Bezos is worth roughly $185 billion. So, we can ask ourselves, did minimum wage and the wealth of the wealthiest person move in proportion over the last 50 years? No, it's not even close. The wealthy have made far, far more than the minimum wage has gone up. But that's proportional logic and it can help you with problems like that.